Welcome back into Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Advent Health. First half of the show, we had head coach Todd Bowles on. Now I'm so excited to be joined by head strength and conditioning coach Anthony Piroli. AP, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Casey.
I am very excited about this. First of all, I just think strength and conditioning is something that a lot of fans probably would love to hear about what it's like to train these players. But before we even get into all that, you came in with what you said were receipts. And I thought you meant like in a trash talking receipts way. And then I found out you meant literal receipts. So I have to start with this. First of all, we had Luke on our show last week, and we joked about how he has complained to you that there are not heavy enough dumbbells, which is ridiculous because they go up to 150 pounds. So like for people just to have some frame of reference, I would like them to already know you have dumbbells that go up to 150. And then your rebuttal to this of the fact that he has complained that there are not heavy enough dumbbells.
Oh yeah, I mean, since he did publicly complain, and we do have our receipts, literally and figuratively. But Luke's dumbbells will be on their way. So
you brought your actual receipt of ordering Luke's dumbbells. Like, are we going to put his name on them? Like these are
no,
personally
we're not.
for
We're
him?
not going to put his name on.
We don't want to.
He probably won't be at the top of that list in that regard.
So
but,
what weight is it? Is it 160? What did you order?
We'll go up to 175 for now.
God, for now.
Yeah, we won't go the whole way up. But,
it is so crazy seeing what these guys can lift. That is just mind-boggling to me. So tell me, first of all, also recently we had the debate online about the O-line and D-line and which group was stronger. And so I thought, what a perfect time to have you on here, because I imagine you could be the judge of this better than anyone, I imagine. So tell me your thoughts on this debate.
Oh, they'll probably laugh about this, but because it will be very much on par for how I would respond to them. But I would say that all the strength stuff is very relative to what they have to do.
I knew we wouldn't
oddly
get the
enough,
straight
I would
answer out of
say
you.
I think that Vita probably answered it the most realistic of the bunch. They train for what they're preparing for, and they're trying to improve upon those things. With that being said, there's going to be highs and lows across both rooms. I definitely have to stay neutral in that regard.
You are Switzerland over here.
There's a lot more numbers, obviously, in the offensive line, just out of the number of players in that room in comparison to the defensive line. With that being said, I do think a few of them that were very strongly favoring the offensive line would be a little bit shocked if they saw a few of those numbers across the board. So maybe this offseason we'll get to see something fun.
See some of that.
Yeah.
When you told me you felt like there was even another position group that could potentially give those guys a run for their money that might surprise people.
Well, yeah, definitely. When you're talking about some of the strength numbers that they were discussing, our outside linebacker room as a whole, especially a good core group that's been around for a number of years here. From absolute values, they definitely would fall underneath both of the line groups, but not by much. And from a relative standpoint, it would probably far surpass it. And that just goes to with the work that they put in, and I guess kind of the overall relative size of the guys, where you're not too big, not too small, all around, and a lot of the strength movements that they would do really favor, I guess, the measurables that those guys have as across the room. I mean, you have guys that are pretty much in the same ballpark from a body weight standpoint. Lever length definitely differs across the room, but it doesn't really show up to negate any of the longer lever guys in comparison to the shorter, stockier guys by any means. But yeah, I would say that room's right up there with the best of them as well.
That's so interesting. We're talking to head strength and conditioning coach Anthony Piroli. So also, you and I got into an interesting discussion after we'd watched, talked about that video, that Tez Johnson, of course, has to pipe in with some of his numbers and what he thinks he may or may not have. Tell me what you were saying about how Tez's strength would probably surprise people. Obviously, it wouldn't surprise him. Tez already knows. But how much it would surprise other people.
Yeah, I would definitely. It's definitely going to be misleading to look at his frame and just like the way that he actually moves on the field, and to come up with the I guess assumption that Tez would be weaker. That definitely would be misleading. He is, from a relative standpoint, obviously he's a strong guy, but. Overall, he would definitely surprise you, especially from a total body strength standpoint. And again, it's specific to what he has to do, how he has to move. But he can definitely create some force in a very short amount of time, and those numbers are pretty shocking to the group as a whole. With that being said, the bench press question, it's really neither here nor there with me because he's a wide receiver. And
yeah, you're not trying to get him to bench a house.
Yeah, so those values are all over the place, but I'm definitely not going to, go into that standpoint, because if I was chasing that, I'd be chasing the wrong thing.
The wrong thing. So let's talk a little bit about what you are chasing. Tell me how you do make the plan for the different position groups and individuals, because again, it's like you have so many people that are working out in there, and you do have a Tez Johnson whose goals are obviously going to be very different than a Tristan Wirfs. And so how do you guys try to, with one weight room and the limited time you have, make plans for each individual guy and know what they need to be doing in that process?
Well, I would say that the plan that's in place for the limited amount of time, obviously all that stuff's going to be worked on for the hours and hours when we're not on the floor with the guys throughout the off season. All the information that we gather on incoming prospects after the college time's done, there's a whole lot of information that comes in. There's information that comes in from our entire performance department, sports science-wise, medical, as well as measurables that we're measuring in the weight room itself, and everything from the coaching staff and the scouting department. Again, for the incoming guys, there's a lot of valuable feedback that we get, and in the continually evolving field that we're currently in, the amount of data streams that you can be having come in are pretty much endless, if not a little bit too much. So we're using a lot of that information and making sure that we just better the player for what type of player they are. We're not getting guys that are just out of high school or anything like that. By the time they make it here, they made it here for what they're great at, and a lot of the stock that we're putting into how we develop them or further develop them is going to be geared towards just making them a better version of themselves that they already came in as opposed to purely filling buckets that are perceived weaknesses. Like, they're not necessarily at this level for what their weaknesses are. And with the exception of if it's going to be a weakness that could lead to a detrimental outcome down the line, in that case we would probably reverse course and go a little bit more towards that end. But yeah, that's definitely a loaded question. There's a lot of different points of that, because this season has a lot of moving parts. It's a long season, and things change on the fly, so we're very much a Plan B program. Those things change based on the outcome of the game and based on the outcome of the day, just how the player comes in. But we make sure, myself and the entirety of the strength staff, we're really conscious on what we're getting when the guy walks in that day, and we know what the potential outcomes could be for how we train them that day, throughout the week, and throughout the season as a whole.
Yeah, we're talking to head strength and conditioning coach Anthony Piroli. So, I mean, a guy coming in, obviously it's the season, you're not wanting him to be worn out for game day, but especially in a week, like this next one coming up that has the Thursday night game and it's a short week, how do you try to make sure that guys maintain the level of strength that they need while also not, wearing them down too much as the season goes on, and some of these guys even come out of college, it's a longer season, and how do you balance those things of gaining and maintaining strength versus also just the demands on them already with the rest of what they're doing?
Well, definitely back in the spring, whenever the season schedule comes out, it's really where it starts. The moment the league drops that schedule, you already know to start mapping out what the season's going to look like from the standpoint of our periods of heavier fatigue, our periods that give us opportunity for more loading on our end on the field itself. And obviously with that, from that standpoint, you know where your Monday night games are. And like heading into those weeks that are longer weeks, a little bit shorter on the back end. Heading into your Thursday weeks are extremely short, but it's a reprieve on the back end of that. Luckily from our standpoint, having the bye week where we did, and then obviously over a month later having a Thursday night game, on one end it does seem that it could be a lot of volume in a short amount of time. On the other end, it's really thinking ahead to what we get back in return after the Thursday night game. So taking a little step back in that week actually ends up being a blessing in disguise, where it's really less is more. We're trying to get out of the guys. If anything, it's going to be a lot more of a primer on our end that week. We're definitely more stress managers in that regard. really throughout the season as a whole, but when it gets to a short week like that, even more so. So it's one of those weeks that we circle on the calendar. We're going to be pulling back, deloading per se, and there's other weeks throughout the season that the opposite is true.
Yeah, and you talked about how much data plays into it now, and knowing how much you guys work with, like you said, sports science, and you have the rehab and you have the training staff and everything. What is the data that you typically use to try to make some of your decisions? What are some of those ways that you guys measure it from your side in particular? Because I mean, I remember seeing the first time that y'all's squat racks and bench racks and everything have all these these things that are showing all these numbers and stuff as people are doing it. They're not just picking up a weight sometimes without any data. What are you guys kind of tracking as far as that goes?
So in the weight room itself, just like you mentioned, the primary moves that the player's doing on that day are going to be tracked from a load and a velocity standpoint. And ultimately the same goes for any of the jump information that we're trying to get on the force plates themselves. And rather than actually changing load values based on the outcome of that, that information is equally as important, if not even more so, to look back on the year as a whole, to use those where we circle those dates on the calendar and see when we pulled back on volume or when we pulled back on load or added more volume, added more load, till we get the outcome that we were after, looking back longitudinally. And that information there is really where that whole planning gets, I guess you could say, fine-tuned each spring when the schedule comes out, by really understanding if we had any bottlenecks of issues that would pop up, whether it be from travel itself, short weeks, or back-to-back away games, West Coast games and such. So that information in the short term can give us some valuable feedback. In the long term, it's probably given us more than anything else has. But from the standpoint of working together and cross-departmental, it's kind of been a blessing in disguise from past places I've worked at where you've had to wear both hats as strength and conditioning and sports science, but then now to actually have people just dedicated purely to that, being able to not just measure all the stuff for us, but making sure that the information is consumable, because there's, as you said, there's a lot of different things that we're tracking on the field itself. And then obviously simultaneously looking at our practice week field work in conjunction with what the league provides for the game day data. And now being able to look at that as if it's coming from the same source it gives you a whole lot more of a complete picture prior years that didn't exist. So it's definitely a big step in the right direction, and making sure that it just aids us in learning the players, especially the young players, at a lot faster rate, so we can make sure we have them on the correct track. But the off season being what it is at this level will prevent some of that. So a lot of our learning with these athletes really happens on the fly once training camp begins, just due to the limited amount of time that we're given in the off season now.
I know that when I've gone in there, it's a very different vibe sometimes depending on what position groups are in there, sides of the ball. I feel like you get to see this other side of a lot of the guys of what lifting is like in there. Tell me what it's like of different groups, different guys, the vibe in the weight room, the way the role music plays in it, and your role even of getting guys excited about this, and just what the dynamics and camaraderie are like in that weight room.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely changed over the years, just the makeup of your roster. And just the type of athlete that you have in the locker room. Luckily, we are in a good scenario here where we don't necessarily need the players to love that room to the extent that we do, just potentially love what it could do for them, for the thing that they love on the field itself. And, from that standpoint, I would be hard-pressed to really say it's a drastic difference, only because across all the position rooms, we got quite a few core guys in each room that really do love and just have high energy regardless of the scenario. Mm-hmm. Obviously, whenever the offensive linemen are in there, they tend to want to listen to a certain type of music, and it actually isn't one type of music. I'm sure it's just a flavor of the day that they're really after, and for the most part, that usually rolls, except for when Levante is in there, and that's been really stamped hard. This guy right here, Luke, understands that now, he checks to make sure Levante's not in the room before he goes to change the music.
Oh my gosh, I love it. What a good vet move and vet understanding that defer to Levante on all things. It's a good rule of thumb. Well, AP, thank you so much for being with us. This has been a blast to hear a little bit about, and thanks for all the work you do to keep our guys strong going into the rest of this season, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for this part of Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Advent Health. But coming up next, we're going to have Director of Performance Nutrition Jessica Pastuf with us. We'll be right back on Buccaneers Radio. Welcome back into Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Advent Health. First half of the show, we had head coach Todd Bowles, we had head strength and conditioning coach Anthony Piroli, and now I'm so excited to be joined by Director of Performance Nutrition Jessica Pastuf. Jess, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Casey.
I really thought this week would be a fun time to talk to people like you and AP, because our listeners hear from coaches all the time, but there's so many people that help make this team go and that contribute to what they do, and I think that what you do is so interesting of helping from the nutrition side. So for people who don't know, tell us just a little bit about what your job entails kind of day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have the best position in the building because I, first and foremost, am very integrated with the food that is served to our players, from breakfast through pregame meal, any occasion throughout the week. But I'm also integrated with head strength and conditioning coach, with our medical staff, and team operations. So working alongside Tim and Zach to facilitate all things nutrition with all movements of the team. So I think I get a good mix of a lot of different capacities of the team. And like I said, I get to be involved with the food and the hydration throughout the week for our players.
Yeah, so I tend to think of it as kind of almost the three different spaces you might do it in as well, of like what's happening at the actual Advent Health Training Center, but then also at the home hotel, and then also at the away hotel, or I guess even fourth at the stadiums as well, because there's food. We obviously have to feed these guys everywhere and anywhere. So starting with what happens at actual Advent Health Training Center, what does that look like throughout the week of how many meals you're providing and the decision making that goes into a week of the meals that are at the actual training center?
Yeah, absolutely. So at our peak, when we're talking about training camp, we could be feeding the players up to 21 meals a week. But when we look at how we program our meals, we're really thinking about what is happening with the players and what do we want available for them. So the when and the what at all phases of the day. So we're talking about preparation for practice in the morning, immediately leading into the field, so pre-practice, during practice, post-practice, later in the day. So again, our food decisions are going to vary depending on where the players are at in their phase of preparation, performance, and recovery.
And tell me a bit about what all is available to them that isn't just a full meal. That I feel like there's always snacks or recovery things. Like, what are some of the things, the tools that you guys use, maybe going into and coming out of practice as well?
Ideally, wanted to take our nutrition recommendations, which are going to be fueling with carbohydrates starting within an hour before practice. So we try to make things really accessible. We have little cups of fruit and pretzels and goldfish. Sometimes in the earlier parts of the season, we have morning practices. We might put out cups of Cinnamon Toast Crunch or cereal that the guys might just kind of shoot back really quickly. But my goal is to have enough options where if a player will grab 2 to 3 cups of our snacks or fuel options, they're going to hit anywhere from like 30 to 75 grams of carbs, which depending on the size of the player is going to be a good little boost heading out to the field. And then even on field, I carry a small cooler with me that's loaded with applesauce and chews and gummies and different types of carb options to hopefully have an option for everyone to get a little extra boost while we're out in the field if needed.
You talked about how you work with all the other departments and football staff. What does that kind of look like of how you guys are working together and the role you each play in influencing what the other does?
Yeah, it's, I think, one of the most unique parts of this position or being in this organization, because everybody has a different perspective and relationship with our players. And so there are times where I'm leaning on a counterpart or someone in a different department to learn something about the player, understand kind of where they're at in their phase of preparation for a game or recovery from an injury or what have you. But then there's also times where maybe I don't have the best relationship or the strongest relationship with that player, but I know a trainer or a strength and conditioning coach does. And so it might be something where I say, hey, AP or whoever, would you remind player X to come get their recovery shake? Or would you remind player Z to go get their pre-workout, concoction? So really leaning on those different department members to not only learn more about the player so I can better serve them, but maybe help facilitate some of the things we want to implement to help them.
And then, so let's say you get a new player in. How do you, because I know it's not like you're doing the exact same thing with every player, obviously, the positions and what situation they're in, if they're trying to gain or lose weight or maintain there's just so many different factors into what you'd be trying to do with each individual player. You get a new person in, what are the assessments, what are the tests, what are the things that help you learn what you're going to be focusing on and working on with someone new coming in?
Yeah, so we start out with doing a nutrition assessment with all of our players, so really just try to get an idea of what are their habits, what are their preferences, what has worked well with them in the past, especially if it's a player coming from a different team, helping them to understand our schedule, and maybe if they came from a team that practiced in the afternoon, helping them shift their diet approach for more of a morning practice here. We do an initial body composition assessment, which helps us understand where their body is currently at versus where they want to be and where they're comfortable at playing. So that's it. Body weight is certainly an area where we collaborate a lot with strength and conditioning, where again, they see a different side of the player that I may not in the weight room. So to really understand from a performance standpoint how I can help them fuel to reach their goals.
I know data is obviously like everything now, that technology and the ways to measure stuff and track things is so big. What are the different ways that you guys try to use some of the data and analytics and tech to figure out what you need to be working on with guys?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that comes into my role is body composition. So we use a DEXA machine, which gives us a really detailed overview of the player's muscle mass, body fat, and also bone mineral density. And this
Who wouldn't want to know all those numbers about themselves? I'm sure they love doing that.
Some more than others. But that becomes a really integral tool to help them understand their body and where weight comes into play. But then becomes really integral part if a player happens to be injured, where we can then really track progress, return to play, give feedback to the athletic trainers and docs that are working with the players.
Oh, so like an imbalance maybe of like if they had hurt an arm, like being able to see the difference between their two sides.
Yep, and being able to kind of track progress for just a small factor, but in their return to play process.
We're talking to Director of Performance Nutrition, Jessica Pastuf. So I know obviously dealing with the heat has to be just a huge part of your job as well, of making sure that guys are hydrated and ready to deal with it. And we've heard about some of the ways that sports science and other departments try to counter it. What is your role in trying to help the guys be prepared for it, and what you've learned over the years even of being here in Tampa?
Yeah, absolutely. Hydration is my favorite part of the job, just because I would say there are very few things that are going to immediately take a player off the field outside of a rare occurrence of an extreme injury, but cramping and lack of carbohydrate stores and fluids on the field is going to be one of the most immediate things that's going to take them out of play. So something that I'm so passionate about, because of course we can't control the weather, we can't control the demands of practice, but if we can help a player optimize their hydration status and give them that extra opportunity to make it through practice or perform, give them an edge up to perform a little bit better, it's something I'm really passionate about.
What would you say is the amount of weight lost in water for either the average guy on our team or maybe the most extreme of all the people, and what they might, because I know not every guy is the same?
Yeah, I would say on average we're looking at probably 8 pounds. However, we definitely have players who have in an extreme case lost 12, 13, maybe even 14 pounds, and like the most extreme, they're usually not doing great if that's the case. But we've seen it, we don't like to see it, but yeah, I would say probably give or take 8 pounds. Again, you have smaller bodies that aren't going to lose quite as much, but so we look at percentages of weight loss, and typically we are going to kind of expect you're going to see about 2.5% weight loss on the really extreme practices of training camp. The higher weight losses get up to 3-4%, and then you really have to focus on recovery for the next day to mitigate injury.
That is crazy. All right, we're going to take a quick break here on Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Advent Health. We're talking to Director of Performance Nutrition, Jessica Pastuf. This is Buccaneers Radio. Welcome back into Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Advent Health. We're talking to Director of Performance Nutrition, Jessica Pastuf. So we talked a little bit about the meal side and the food side when you're here, which I'm sure is a lot easier to control. It's the same space, you know everything. But on the road and at different places all the time, what is that like to prepare and plan for meals when it is somewhere you are not physically there until you're there with the team and needing everything to be right?
Yeah, so our goal is to replicate the options available at home on the road, so it's a very consistent environment for our players, especially when we're heading to a city where maybe some of them haven't been to, or we're at a new hotel and we don't know kind of what options are around. So our goal, again, is to replicate food options that we have here, but ensure that players have something that they're consistent and familiar with, so that they know how they're going to feel when they eat leading into a game. So in our preparation, we prepare what we call an RFP menu, and so we put together our our base of food that we are requesting the hotel to prepare for us for our night before game and our game day meals. The base of this menu is going to be the same to every city that we go to, again, to ensure that we have consistent options and the players know what's going to be available. We do send a base of recipes as well. So again, we're hoping that each consistent item is prepared consistently in each city, depending on who's cooking it. But then we rotate a few options. We have a little feature station. So if, for example, we're in New Orleans, we might have a little jambalaya. If we're in Carolina, we might have a little bit of barbecue available. So something to spice it up a little bit, keep the guys engaged. But as part of that process, we send our performance dietitian on staff a few days in advance of the team. And so he will arrive at the hotel, meet with the chefs, review our menus, review products that they have, and ensure that all of the drinks and the snacks and specific items that we request are on site, so that when I show up with the team, we can hopefully rest assured that what we've requested is executed.
And you talked about the pregame meal. You wanted to, even though you mix some things up maybe the night before the game, you know, for a little local flavor, you want the meal before the game to be the same basically every time, right?
Yes.
And it's because people just need like they need to know what's there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want a lot of different options. We want them simple and familiar options. So our basis of our meal is going to be white rice, pasta, chicken, steak, salmon. We're going to maybe change up the flavor of the chicken each week to hopefully keep it a little bit interesting, but we want that players to feel very comfortable with what's available, to know that when they put it in their body, they're going to know exactly how they feel, and that they're not searching for the options that they want. We have it set up in a very routine way so that when they walk through the meal line, it's set up in the same manner, and they're not looking or searching or kind of wondering where the options are.
It's so interesting. So I think one thing that I would probably surprise a lot of people is what's available the night before a game. And I know you and I have joked about this before, that if people were to walk in, that first of all, there's dinner, and then there's something called snack, which has always made me laugh because that implies like a granola bar. Snack is much more than that. So tell everyone a bit about what snack is and what all is available and why it would surprise people what it is.
Yeah, I joke with hotels every time we hop on our initial call to describe this meal. We do call it night before game snack. I don't actually know exactly why it is, but I've acquired it and I roll with it. But we keep this meal is quite expansive, as you mentioned. So we have anything from our pasta action station, where they can do made-to-order pasta and rice bowls, chicken wings, flatbread pizza, grilled chicken wings, I should say, grilled, not fried, flatbread pizza, hamburgers, mac and cheese, chicken tenders that are also grilled. And again, the big concept of this meal is we want the players to eat. So whether they're nervous or maybe just in an unfamiliar city where they don't know where to go out to eat, we want them to feel very comfortable walking the meal room, have flavors that they're going to recognize, and have a lot of different options available. So again, if there are nerves or what have you, hopefully something as simple as a lean grilled cheeseburger will be something that they're willing to take in, so we're getting calories in them before the game. We're
talking to Director of Performance Nutrition, Jessica Pastuf. What are the weird requests or things players want, the things that you do to try to accommodate, or the things that, what have been some of the bizarre, interesting things that some guys want?
Oh gosh, we've had players in the past that have requested hot dogs at halftime.
I've heard maybe Tez Johnson might be one of those.
He is.
He said that on one of our shows, and I was like, I'm sure Jess is thrilled about this.
Not my favorite, but if that's routine and ritual, and so it's, I think one of the biggest learning curves I've had coming out of college, where you're learning about the best nutrition practices and principles, and then all of a sudden you're put in the locker room at halftime in real life, and you see what they consume at times. So we do our best to accommodate, giving our best recommendations, but also ensuring that the players have their rituals and routines and feel supported. And so if it's something where, all right, if this player has to have a hot dog at halftime, maybe I'm then compromising to ensure we've got a really nice quality meal coming in after the game, or we make sure that they have a really, really great pregame meal. So yeah, the hot dog is definitely one of them. I've had a request for pickled eggs. That one I did not facilitate, but I've had the request. Let's see. Yeah, those are probably the craziest two that I've had.
That's quite a request. And then finally, what do you feel like you are usually yelling at players? Like, what is the thing you're having to constantly remind them of or tell them to do? Like, what's your nagging thing?
Yeah, for most of the time in training camp, it's to weigh out. There's so much value in understanding where their weight is post-practice from a hydration standpoint, where if we can get them within a few minutes of practice, and that to know, again, before they start chugging Gatorade or water, to really know where they've ended practice from a hydration state, it's so critical for them to see and for us to understand how the practice impacted them and what kind of work needs to be done to prepare for the next one.
So interesting. And I guess I also wanted to ask, eating during the game, what are the thoughts from whether the start to the finish? How much are guys eating or not, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, general recommendations, we want to see between 30 and 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour. That can be met most of the time with a can or two of Gatorade, but for some of the bigger bodies or the higher kind of burners, let's say, to get some type of fuel in them at halftime is really important, not only to sustain through the game, but to mitigate kind of the impact of recovery needs after the game. So we do try to get Rice Krispie treats and bananas and some quick kind of carb options to them. Most players, I would say probably 75%, have pretty routine things that they'll consume at halftime for sure, if not during the game as well.
So interesting. Well, Jess, thank you so much for joining us. This has been super interesting, and thank you for all the work you do with the team.
Thanks, Casey.
All right, that's going to do it for us on Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Advent Health. This is Buccaneers Radio.